Michael Klam here with Olga García for Conversations with Poets at the San Diego Public Library. I got to thank the library for giving us a place to do Conversations with Poets, and I want to celebrate the folks behind the scenes, Rachel and Sherwood and Kent on editing and camera and sound. Anthony Blacksher, representing the San Diego Poetry Annual, is directing from home today. We have submissions coming up on June 15th for the San Diego Poetry Annual, and I'm so honored to have here in the public library Olga García. She is our bilingual editor, and our last collection, Fractal, is an extraordinary collection of poems in both English and Spanish. Hello, Olga, how you doing?
Hola, Michael, muchas gracias, muy bien, mucho gusto. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really an honor for me to be here to share with you this space where the jacarandas are blooming. We are surrounded by this beautiful scenery. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I drove down.
Muchas gracias.
I actually drove down 10th, and 10th there are jacarandas all the way too. So coming down 10th, I had this bed of purple flowers, all the ones that had fallen down on the ground. I came through those on the way down to the library. Yeah, downtown is beautiful right now. It's San Diego sunshine. It's such a wonderful place to live. You grew up in Torreon, is that right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about when you first started writing poetry.
Well, Torreon is a city, very interesting city. It was founded in 1907 by the interest of American and European companies on establishing a place to live and to work. So that's how my city came along to be in this world. And it was a global city. I was able to live with friends that belong to many different cultures and ethnicities and religions. I also went to a college to a school in Torreon of bilingual American and Spanish teachers. And poetry came along in my life thank you to my grandma. My grandma taught me since I was 3 years old, the Psalms. She was a very religious woman and a very wise woman. And since I was 3, she started to make me memorize the Psalms. And as I got older, the first shock to me was that these words can be seen on the page. She taught me how to read. And I started reading from the Bible, from the Psalms.
So you started reading your first words on the page,
yes.
And your reading started with poetry, started
yes.
with the Psalms. Interesting. And you took on the pseudonym of Enriqueta. Is that grandma?
Yes, well, yes, I have the pseudonym of Enriqueta Luisi, and I got this pseudonym from my grandmas. My grandma, Enriqueta, was she was from Chihuahua, from the north of Mexico, and she used to write poetry also. But for some reason, she never, nobody knew what their poems were, but she was known for being a poet, although she died very young. She was 33 years old when she died after 7 kids, and she got this disease, that was very common, puerperal fever in women that gave birth. And she was like a lady that spoke French and played the piano, and very nice woman, Enriqueta. And my great-grandma, her last name was Luisi, so that's where I got the Enriqueta Luisi. My great-grandma was totally just the opposite. Right. She was born in Italy and came to Mexico, and she hated to have her Italian blood, and she said that she wanted to get out all the Italian blood out to become really Mexican. And her name was Antonia Luisi, and she was a rebel. She had Catholic parents, but she became a Protestant.
Was that right?
And then they asked her to marry this guy, a rich guy that wanted to marry her, but she didn't want to have do anything for a man. So she went out with him and not married him, but joined him, and lived with him. And she didn't care that she was, you are not married. She was very a devil, you know, in those in those times in Mexico.
Yeah. So you have on one side you have Catholicism and religion, and on the other side you have Luisi, right?
Yes.
And she's more of a rebel, right?
Yes.
My mom is Catholic, Roman Catholic, 3 times a day down to the church. They live in Ireland. My dad's an atheist, so I grew up in a house with an atheist dad, a very Catholic mom, and I can tell you that those two bashing together helps to create a lot of good poetry. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. That's my experience. My father was Methodist. My mother was Catholic.
Right.
My mother's family was Catholic. Then my mother converted into Methodist also. But we lived in a society back then. I was born in 1951. That Mexico was very, 99.46% was Catholic.
Catholic, right.
So this city was a very young city, and it were like maybe 200,000 people back then. And I think we were only like 80 people in the whole city were Protestants. There were more Jewish people than Protestants. So we faced discrimination, and it's very tough because when you live in a family that you go with some people and they are Catholics and the others are Methodist, and it's conflicting, you know.
For sure.
But that gives you a broader spectrum of life as a little. You know, you start questioning. I go to the Catholic Church, I see this. I go to the Protestant Church, I see this. So you get a more broad point of view of the world.
For sure. And how did you end up in the States? Because Torreon is in Coahuila, is that right?
Yes.
And it borders in the north with Texas. Did you come through Texas? Did you come straight to San Diego? How did you get here?
Well, it's a long story. I went to study to Monterrey. And in Monterrey, I met my husband, and I studied physics and math. And in that time, there were no universities in Torreon, or in many cities in Mexico didn't have a university, except the big cities like Monterrey, Guadalajara, Mexico City, or some places like Guanajuato, or other places. But in Torreon, there was no university. So of 275 students from Torreon that went to study in the Tec de Monterrey, that's where I studied, a private university, I was the only woman that went to study in the Tec de Monterrey.
Is that right?
In that time, yes. I was a valedictorian also in the high school, and I was offered scholarships to go all over, any place I wanted to go. Everything was going to be paid for. But I don't know if it fortunately or unfortunately, I didn't do it because I got TB. I got tuberculosis. I was sick for a year. And I was supposed to stay in Torreon and study to be a secretary or something like that. But a neighbor came to my dad and told him, no, come on, she looked sort of like maybe she's smart. Why don't you send her to Monterrey? You have family there, whatever. So that's how I ended up in Monterrey. But then, as I married, my husband decided to come to Tijuana, and I was here in Tijuana. And then his mother is an American citizen, so he's an American citizen also. So after things got a little bit difficult in Tijuana for teenagers, in that time, a new wave of what they're called narco juniors started emerging in Tijuana. Narco juniors were wealthy kids that joined the narcos, the cartels. So my husband and I decided it would be a better place if we would move to the States, to San Diego. And the closest city we found, and very close to the border, was Chula Vista. So that's how I came to.
Have you been there ever since? You're in Chula Vista now?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a border poet? Some people sort of identify that way as border poets. If you do, what does that mean to you to be a border poet or someone who writes along the border, especially editing a bilingual edition?
Well, border poet, I believe I am a border poet, but mainly I'm a border person. Yeah. I have always faced these borders, like being a Catholic, a Methodist, and going beyond that. So also in my gender as a woman, a Mexican woman, it's very important to emphasize the culture you were born, Mexican. So I was able to go over that border of being stay at home at 16, 17, at that age, 18, get married. I was old because I was married when I was almost 21. I was an old woman to get married. So I didn't, 21. And so I didn't marry at 18 or something, and I went to college, and I studied also another border I transgressed was studying something that there are no women in this profession that I studied was physics and math. Mm-hmm. I would go in the Tec de Monterrey to a big building. There was all engineers and scientists working in that, studying in that building, students, and I was the only woman there. Yeah. And there was another friend of mine that she also studied. I would study physics and math, and she would study physics. And the first time we went to the building to get into our class, the first class I was going to take there, all these men came out and they were looking at us and whistling. They were all whistling and saying, "Hey, you girls, you are in the wrong place. You should go to the literature or the communication place or to, I don't know, another building there at campus, in the campus." So those were my experiences. I had many, many experiences with men and with people in many fields. So I think that's what makes me a little of a border person, border poet, right? Bilingual.
So do you think when you're writing, do you get this out in your experience as a woman, and in those situations, do you get that? Do you release that in your poetry? And who speaks the most in those moments, Enriqueta or Luisi, when you're talking about your experiences?
Well, this is a very interesting question, Michael. Thank you. I have not figured it out yet very well. I have many theories and I make many hypotheses because I don't know where this energy or whatever comes and expresses itself in a poem, but I think it's like I picture myself or what is going on in my life, like what everything is going on in my life is here, and there all my subconscious, whatever I have in the subconscious is over here. And for some reason, this thing in the subconscious, and everything that is going on into my subconscious, this thing in one side, this thing in the other side, they jump like into a black hole. They jump there, and then voila, here it is, the poem. Yeah. It's like a quantum physics, It's all this subconscious. I have all my border things. I have my bad things, my good things, all the things I have experienced that I am not conscious of, many of them. They arise on the poem, and when I write the poem, I am very surprised. Sometimes I find the angel there, but sometimes I find the devil there. So the Luisi and the Enriqueta, they are all mixed. And then sometimes a new thing that I didn't know, So it's always like scary to find out what you wrote.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that poetry does, right? It doesn't just organize your thoughts. It really kind of gets what's deep inside of you and brings it to the forefront. And then the way you express it and the way it comes out. Do you have a kind of big bang where it all just flows out like that, a Star is Born kind of experience? Or do you really edit and polish and go through a whole process with your poetry, or both?
Yes, I have had both experiences. One of my books, first of all, I started writing in English. I would be writing in Spanish, then came 25 years later, very happy 25 years. And my teachers wanted me in high school to go to literature. But I was very mad because I wanted to go to sociology, to study sociology in Paris. And of course, that was a dream. And I had to go to Monterrey. So I opened the book of all what I should study, and it came out to be physics and math. And I said, this is what I want to study. And literature I liked to write. I would write poems since I was little. But my main thing was sociology and all this about the social issues and things like that were going on in 1968 all over the world. In Mexico was a terrible year, but in Paris was, so I wanted to go there, but well, I finally ended up in Monterrey. And
I've noticed that a lot of people who study sociology, they become poets. Anthony Blackshear was a sociology professor.
I didn't know that.
We just interviewed Sharon Elise. She does the whole sociopoetics and sociology study where she's at Cal State San Marcos, right? So it's interesting to me that the study of sociology seems to lead to some very deep, thought and introspection, and it leads to these great poems. Did you have a poet inspiration? Did you discover somebody in high school or in college that kind of inspired you to become even more so a stronger poet?
I read a lot of, I think my main inspiration and my number one is Emily Dickinson. Mm-hmm. Emily Dickinson talks to me always. It's the only book that I have by my bedside forever. It's after those 25 years that were very, very happy, I retook the writing poetry, but because I experienced a very, very dark moment in my life, very, very, very dark. So I started writing, and I was afraid to write in Spanish. So I started writing in English. And I started writing, my first poems were a mathematical model. I will use the Fibonacci numbers and make with them words. I will use all these forms of mathematics, and they came along like 3 or 4 books like that. You were asking me about if it is a big bang or the editing thing.
Yeah.
So I'm retaking that, and the thing is with a big bang, then my life settled. I became more. I didn't kill myself. Okay,
Hey.
I didn't kill myself. So I started writing in Spanish, and several years ago, it came a poem called It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up. I grabbed my pencil and my notebook, and in darkness, I started writing. It was a flow that lasted for 3 hours, and I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote without end, and that's how the book came along. I looked at it. And there was always this thing that repeated itself. It was EA. I didn't know what EA meant. Mm-hmm. So that's the title of the book, EA. Mm-hmm. It was published, and I am walking, and I'm going to do a presentation about this book, do a reading about this book, and I find in Guanajuato, this Japanese man that tells me, he's sitting there on the floor. I said, for 10 pesos, I do your name in Japanese. Yeah. And so I said, no, I don't want my name. I don't want to know what it looks like. I want this EA to tell me what is it, to write it, And he grabs it and he said, you know what EA means in Japanese? And I said, no, I don't know. And he said, it means no. It means no. And okay, so
no.
No. So maybe all the time I was repeating in Japanese, no. I don't know.
Make it
maybe
stop, get it out.
Maybe a Kurosawa movie got into the subconscious, the word EA, and just appeared. But those sorts of books. Others books I write, and The poems, I make them all the time here in my head. And when they're ready, they come out. And then I leave them, come back to them, edit them. And because I'm always thinking, and I say, oh, no, this word is not the one. This is the other one. So many of my poems are edited and,
Right, and
but
polished.
in that process, polished.
Would you share an original poem for us now? Will you read us
Oh,
one of your
yes.
poems?
Oh,
All right.
we love to.
Please do.
This is from Fractal. From Fractal, I am going to read this poem. Enriqueta Luisi, a punto de. En esta mañana de catéteres agitados, vuelan los muertos en cada hoja de otoño. Células temen ser coronadas, axiomas tenebrosos permean el aire. Descubrir a los 70 que di todo el pan de mí a un diente falso es brincar de la aritmética cotidiana a los números transfinitos. Es un pulsar en aorta dilatada. En el temporal rescato varios, canto los dígitos de pi y digo, el vacío es un objeto más en el espacio-tiempo. A punto de ser nada, Emily consagra la poca masa que aún me queda. This is a poem that is very difficult to translate, Michael, because there is a word here, pandemia, and that means, I translated it in a whole kernel, but the pandemia is the pandemia, what we are doing, but in Spanish means like the breath of myself. I gave all the breath of me too, by making this play, this little play I made with the words.
Right.
So the translation is sort of, I made the translation also. So
can we read it for us? Can we hear the translation? Or would you like me to read it?
Well, I would prefer you.
Oh, sure.
How you feel?
I'll read the translation. So, on the verge of, and this is your translation.
Right? Yes, that's my translation.
In this morning of agitated catheters, dead bodies fly in each autumn leaf. Cells beg not to be crowned. Dark axioms permeate the air. To realize at 70 that my whole kernel got wasted in a false tooth. It is to jump from daily arithmetic to transfinite numbers. Yes, a pulsar in the enlarged aorta. In the temporary thunderstorm, I rescue ovaries. I sing the digits of pi and say, the void is only an object in space-time. In the verge of being nothing, Emily needs the scarce mass that holds me together.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael, it's wonderful to hear you in English. I love the English language and how you
that's what we team up and do English, Spanish. Why not? I think Emily Dickinson had a little bit of the quantum theorist in her, for sure. I mean, she wrote "Forever is composed of nows." Right, so from that sort of Mandelbrot set of coming in and going out, and I think she had a real quantum theorist in her. She said, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant."
Yes,
and the
slant,
brain,
that
the
word,
brain is wider than the sky. She had this kind of sort of obsession with the infinite.
Yes.
Right, and the infinitesimally small.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You also brought another poem here. Is this an Emily Dickinson poem, or is this one of the poems also from
Emily Dickinson?
Oh, you want to read that one? Will you read that one to us?
Well, this is a very important poem for me.
Okay.
I will tell later why. I'll try to do my best.
Go for it. Let's see. Be great.
By Emily Dickinson. Don't put up my thread and needle. I'll begin to sew when the birds begin to whistle. better stitches. So these were bent, my side got crooked. When my mind is plain, all the seams a queen's endeavor would not blush to own. Hems too fine for ladies tracing to the slightless knot. Tucks of dainty interspersion like a dotted dot. Leave my needle in the furrow where I put it down. I can make the zigzag stitches straight when I am strong. Till then, dreaming I am sewing, fetch the seam I missed. Closer, so I, at my sleeping, still surmise I stitch. Yes.
Thank you. Olga, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to read with you. And I'm also looking forward to talk to you. And I'm also looking forward to working with you on the bilingual edition of the San Diego Poetry Annual coming up this year. Submissions start on June 15th. So if you write in English or Spanish or both, if you have a poem to come in Spanish or a poem to come in English, we'll translate. Or how does that work? Can they are they just sending Spanish poems, or do they send both to you?
No, really, we accept English original and Spanish original,
okay.
and Spanish original, and send out the translation. This bilingual anthology is really a treasure because we have in it both languages. So poets that only read it's the interest not only of poets that read only in Spanish or in English, but also the translators. We have translators that are very interested in looking just at the translator, how they are translated, you know. So it's also for students, gives a wide variety of what poetry is like. We don't go in a certain model or for a certain type of poetry. So it's representative of the border, what the border is. Border is many voices, many ethnicities, many nationalities, many languages together. So here is the same thing with the San Diego, the bilingual poetry book, the anthology. It's really a jewel, I think, in San Diego and in California and in the States and in the world.
I agree, and I think this is one of the absolute most important, best parts of what the San Diego Poetry Annual is doing,
yes,
having this edición bilingüe. And you did such a fantastic job with this year's. So if you get a chance, take a look, check it out, or purchase the bilingual edition of the San Diego Poetry Annual. It's called Fractal, and the editora is Olga García. Again, Olga, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And once again, thank you to the San Diego Public Library here downtown for giving us a home. Thanks to Misty Jones and Mark Cherry for supporting poetry in San Diego. See you at the next Conversations with Poets.